Good evening. Welcome to the 2021 Brattleboro Select Board Candidate Forum. This chance to hear from all of the candidates is brought to you by Community Media, BCTV, and iBrattleboro.com. Join me in welcoming the candidates, Evan Chadwick, Kurt Dimes, Jessica Gelter, Ian Goodnow, Ricky Rosati, Daniel Quip, and Jackson Stein. We're going to begin with 3-minute introductions, then we'll get into questions. And we've all worked out in advance that we have a timer, a timekeeper, Elizabeth McLaughlin, and she is going to be raising a flag when there's 30 seconds to go. And then she'll be putting up another flag when time is up. And with that, we're going to just get right into things. We're going to start with the introductions. 3 minutes each. I'd like you to please introduce yourself. Tell us about your interest in Brattleboro, why you would like to be elected to the Brattleboro Select Board, and a bit about how you would make decisions, especially if the public seems divided on some sort of issue. We're going to go alphabetically, and Evan. Let's unmute you.
So thanks, Chris, and thanks to Brattleboro TV. I think that this forum, as well as many other forums that we experience as Brattleboro citizens, really emphasize the importance of community television in our society to have a healthy debate about issues that are important to its citizens. As you said, Chris, my name is Evan Chadwick. I've been a Brattleboro resident since 2006. I grew up in Rochester, Vermont, a small town of about 1,000. I graduated from Rochester High School from a class of 12. After college or after high school, I attended Keene State College, where I got my social science degree. My senior year, I decided that I wanted to leave the college scene and find a more quiet town, and I stumbled upon Brattleboro, found a little cottage on Upper Dummerston Road, and I never left. Why I'm so passionate about running for Select Board now is that when I was young, finishing my college degree, I was given an opportunity in this town. Tom Costello, an attorney in town, took a flyer on me. I walked into his office unsolicited, saying, I'm interested in the legal profession. I'd like a job. I did that to every single law office in Brattleboro. I walked around in my ill-fitted suit. I hardly even knew how to tie a tie at that point. I got no other callbacks besides Tom. And Tom's reason for giving me a chance was, I saw that you went to Rochester High School. Tom was a Rutland native. I saw that you were the captain of your basketball team, and he gave me that opportunity. He taught me that there was a legal clerkship. I was interested in studying the law. I had applied to law schools. He told me that I didn't need to go to law school. I could clerk under him for 4 years and then be eligible to take the bar. Without that opportunity, I would not be in Brattleboro today, running my own law firm. I have, including myself, 7 employees in 3 offices throughout the state. I love Brattleboro. I love the opportunities that it's given to me and other people. I am also nervous. Brattleboro has a lot of challenges right now. Brattleboro is having a difficult time retaining people, young professionals, and really we are at a crossroads with regards to where we want to go as a town and who we want to appeal to. So I feel that my experience both as a business owner as well as a landlord in town will give me some practical knowledge and the problems that we can as a town solve. And if given the opportunity, I look forward to getting my hands dirty at the Select Board level to see how we can make Brattleboro more affordable and more welcoming to everyone. Thank you.
Great. All right, Kurt, tell us about your interest in Brattleboro, why you'd like to be elected to the Select Board, and a bit about how you'd make decisions if the public seems divided on issues.
Okay. My name's Kurt Dimes. I work mostly and have worked mostly through Brattleboro Common Sense. It's a 501c4 philanthropic charity. And I've been active in Brattleboro politics since 2007. I want to be involved with the Select Board because the Select Board is too involved. The Select Board is too much concentrating power in itself and exercising its opinions everywhere when it shouldn't. According to the charter, the select board, the select board shall have the, how's it go? The general oversight over the property and affairs of the town, except for those which are assigned to another particular officer. So they're supposed to be an administrative, day-to-day body, handling things like the lighting of the sidewalks and stuff like that. They're not supposed to be a guiding body for the town. They're not supposed to be dominating and dominating all the debates on things. That's supposed to be the representative town meeting by the charter arrangement in charter amendments in 1959. The representative town meeting is a guiding body for the town and a source of ideas, proposals, and commentary. That's what the RTM is supposed to do. And the select board has just gradually taken over that function. And it's not a democratic thing. They control the meetings. They have in the past censored petitions many times. Brattleboro Common Sense took them to court for that, and now they don't do it anymore. But they have dominated the RTM, and the RTM does not even think of itself as the body that's supposed to be the guiding body for the town. And I emphasize the select board's not supposed to do it because their charter says those jobs are for the select board, which are not for any other particular officer. When Dan started up 350 here in Brattleboro, he came to us, that is to me individually, for help with a petition. And he didn't need a lot of petition help. He didn't need a lot of help writing it at all. So I wasn't much help that way. But I collected a few pages of petitions, a few pages of signatures. And we were able to do that because we had.
All right. Very good.
It's always faster than you think. Thank you.
Well, prizes at the end for everyone who sticks to their times. Jessica, please tell us about yourself, your interest in Brattleboro, why you want to be on the select board, and how you might make decisions if faced with conflicting public opinion.
Sure. So hi, I'm Jessica Gelter. I want to thank you guys for hosting us tonight. I'm really excited that we get the opportunity to do this. And thanks to everyone who's watching and participating live on Facebook or, a later live stream. So there's going to be people voting in this year's election who moved to Brattleboro last year. There'll be others who have been here 20 years, or others like me, my family's been here for 5 generations, others, 10 or 12 generations, and others who trace their families back to the first peoples and call this land Wantasticock. So Brattleboro is home to all of us. And, we all vote, we volunteer, we run for office because we care about our home. And I decided to run for select board because I'm inspired. I was inspired this year by the community engagement and democratic processes that I was seeing at the select board meetings this year. And our community seems to be stepping up and doing more than ever before to engage in local democracy. So I think we need a select board that can rise to meet them. For the last several years, I was a member of the Brattleboro Planning Commission. I got to work closely with community and staff, developing the long-term plans for our town. So now I'm really interested in taking that long-term planning and applying it to reality, making it happen. My professional career has been in the theater and the arts, and it's been very collaborative. Theater is a collaborative art form. We build teams, we find each team member's strengths and create meaningful stories and experiences out of that. So all of that training has given me the ability to reach out to stakeholders in all parts of the community and bring them together to the table, create strong partnerships, hear each other's voices. It's what I do in my work as a nonprofit executive director. I run a nonprofit that serves creative businesses with advocacy and technical support. Over 7 years, I've built a really strong, sustainable nonprofit. So I believe that with the skills from the creative work I do and the nonprofit work I do, bringing communities together to build vision together and create projects together, I think that I'm really interested in seeing what role the Select Board has to facilitate the conversations and the community engagement that's really on the rise and really inspiring and working towards a new community vision. I also realize that not a lot of people participate in these town meeting elections, and that's a real bummer. Select Board members.
Oh. All right. Ian, do you need the question repeated or do you think you got it?
I think I got it.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm going to start my clock. Hi, everybody. If you don't know me already, my name is Ian Goodnow. I currently sit on the Brattleboro Select Board in one of the 2 one-year seats. I am running for the 3-year seat, which is currently held by Brandy Starr, who is not running for re-election. Besides being on the Brattleboro Select Board, I'm also a Justice of the Peace and have been for the last 2.5 years. So I sit on the Board of Civil Authority, I help run the elections, and I get to marry people. And a quick shout out to Dylan and Michael, who I married this afternoon. Congratulations to them both. I really wish them the best. So a little bit about myself. I'm from Essex, Vermont. I went to the University of Vermont, where I met my college sweetheart, Ruth, who is now my wife. And she's from the area, and traveling back and forth from Essex to Brattleboro is where I got to know Brattleboro and fell in love with it. I am enrolled in the Law Office Study Program, which actually Evan just referenced earlier. Very briefly, as he explained, it's a alternative to going to law school, and you apprentice under an attorney. I also am apprenticing under attorney Thomas Costello at Costello Valenti and Gentry. And I'm in my 3rd year, and it's a 4-year program. So I hope to both take the bar and pass the bar next year. So why am I running for the 3-year position? Well, this last year has been incredibly challenging, but I have found it immensely enjoyable, and I have learned so much over this last year and have enjoyed serving the Brattleboro community as a Select Board member. And I want to take a moment to thank Tim Wessel, Liz McLaughlin, Daniel Quip, and Brandy Starr for all the time that they've given this town this last very challenging year, and for everything they've taught me. I'm immensely grateful to each of them and for having an opportunity to serve on the board with them. So yeah, I really hope that Brattleboro wants me to continue this work for the next 3 years. And, I just want to thank you, Chris, for setting this all up, and BCTV. I am looking forward to an informed, lively debate this evening.
Very good. All right, Ricky, please introduce yourself. Tell us about your interest in Brattleboro, why you'd like to, one toss to cut, and why you'd like to be elected to the Brattleboro Select Board, and a bit about how you would make decisions, especially if the public seems divided on an issue.
Well, I want to run for Select Board because I find that in most of the meetings I go to, not just the Select Board meetings, but very general meetings, that people are either unaware of the history of the colonization of Wontescot to Brattleboro. They're unaware of the history of the last 60 years of the representative town meeting instead of the direct democracy by the public electorate, which the majority of the Vermont municipalities have. So, and then most people they don't know that history, or they do know that history, but I find that the other candidates aren't doing anything to really change that narrative. I think that the other candidates are really trying to perpetuate the status quo, except for Kurt Dimes. I give him some credit. I know he's trying really hard. And I want to expand direct democracy by giving the public electorate, by expanding who even qualifies to be the public electorate, younger people, people who have felonies, people who are migrants who can't afford citizenship status. They all need to represent themselves, because elected representatives can't really represent anyone but their self either. So once we allow more people to speak for themselves by how they vote, I would like to enable them to do that online, and to have more transparency about who we do elect by showing their voting records publicly as well. So there's just so many actionable steps to increase direct democracy, but I'm also have a really long agenda of trying to have a public referendum to vote on decentralizing the economy with a municipal currency. And when we do that, the public can regulate how we disperse the currency as well, what rates they want to negotiate with. We can contract to have universal basic income, health care coverage, and accessible water testing, because the water system pipes, they aren't really regulated to be checked before they break, and that can cause a crisis. So not knowing the quality of your water is a crisis.
All right. Who's next on our list? Daniel, Quip. You want the questions reread, or do you got them?
I think I got it. Thanks, Chris.
Right.
Thanks to BCTV. Thanks, Brattleboro, for doing this. And I want to just speak to what I've been up to on the board over the last year. I don't think you need to know where I went to school or anything like that. So I'm seeking my third one-year term on the board. And as Ian has already pointed out, this has been the most challenging of years. So firstly, on COVID, on May 19th, I championed the mask order in Brattleboro. This was months ahead of a statewide mask mandate from the governor. And I'm pretty certain that our swift action on that has kept cases down here, as well as building a cultural norm of mask wearing in the town. On March 15th, very early in the pandemic, I urged the town manager to put in place a water and sewer disconnection moratorium so that people could keep their hands clean, even if they couldn't pay their bills. When we had discussion about town meeting, how to carry it out, I pushed for an all online RTM on Zoom because I wanted people to be able to participate safely and as fully as possible. I'm glad that we did that, and we'll be doing it again in a few weeks' time. And then in the middle of the year, as part of the national reckoning with racism and policing, we were experiencing a great number of calls to reject our own budget, which we had the extraordinary circumstance of adopting ourselves rather than having it go to town meeting. At the time, I voted to adopt the budget rather than leaving town operations unfunded, as we were 2 weeks away from a new fiscal year. But as part of that decision, I asked for the board to agree to deeply review police policies, procedures, and the budget, which we have then sort of begun to undertake through what has now been called the community safety review process. I've worked with people in the community on that process, and have kept the voices of impacted people front and center when considering the report. And I support acting on the majority of the recommendations in the report. And then finally, 2 bits of mundane but important stuff. When we were taking a look at the water and sewer rates for the next 5 years, I saved the ratepayers money by reducing the sewer rate from a 2% increase to a 1% increase. It was one of my most proud and boring moments. And then later on in the budget process, I got us an additional $50,000 for road paving. And I'm going to continue to push, if re-elected, for us to fully fund our street paving projects so that we can have roads that are in decent shape. And, you know, with this election taking place at this time of year, you really notice the roads. And I got to tell you, they're in rough shape today. And that's not to say that the Public Works Department don't do an excellent job, but we have challenges and we need to fund those things fully. Thanks.
All right. Well, the next 4 questions are all about potholes.
Excellent.
Jackson Stein. Do you need the questions again, or do you know it by now?
I think I've got it.
All right. Introduce yourself.
I am Jackson Stein. I use they, them pronouns. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that this debate is over governing occupied Abenaki land, and I want to acknowledge and reckon with the harm caused there. I am running for the select board because after attending every meeting for a year, I think that we can make our decision-making process more streamlined. I do want to thank the board of last year. I think we've reached good decisions. We've passed the security deposit proposal, which the union that I organized with put forth to the town. They ordered the community safety review, and now we're kicking around whether we want to follow through with the framework put forth by that report. When the community comes together in big ways like this to demand change, I think that as local government, we have a responsibility to the people that we serve to be as expeditious as we can with getting these things passed. I am not a 100 generation Vermonter. I moved to Vermont some 4 or 5 years ago. I've been here my whole adult life. I've been in Brattleboro just over 1.5 years now. I've been very involved since I've gotten here. In just the short time that I've been here, I've seen rent go up. I've seen rampant gentrification. The closing of the only discount food store in town. This is not signs of a sustainable community. And I think, like Jess was saying, some of the people that are voting in this election may have just come to Brattleboro months ago. We're seeing a huge influx of new people in town, and that's incredible. We need to protect the people that live here. We need to protect the marginalized people that live here. And we need to make sure that the town is being run in a way that benefits everyone. That's going to be it. I'm not going to go till stop.
Very good. All right. Well, we're all on schedule and everybody's been introduced. Very good. All right. Next round of questions. I have 5 questions. They're all going to be 2-minute answers. And let's get started with one about climate change. Brattleboro and the people here seem to be in agreement that things need to be done about climate change. I haven't seen any climate deniers recently, but what those specific things are that we need to do is not in agreement. There's been some tension between sort of the slow and steady, making progress approach versus a more rapid, let's take dramatic action approach. How are we doing? Where do you stand? And what can the Brattleboro Select Board do to help solve a global issue? We'll start with Kurt.
Hi. The Brattleboro Select Board has not been helpful. There is a small climate declaration, climate resolution for renewable electricity, which was approved in 2018. It came to a vote twice before that, starting in 2010. And it's been sitting and bouncing around in town government for 3 years. And last Tuesday, the select board decided to debate the definition of a building. as part of their discussion on this. It was pathetic. Certainly not Dan's fault or Ian's. My organization has been paralleling, I believe, the conscience of the community with that resolution, with a resolution for very minimal conservation, with a declaration in 2014 that the climate change was human caused and that Mr. Obama should make declare carbon to be a greenhouse gas. That also was passed. But now we have a stuck board. I think people who may consider themselves non-deniers are denying the emergency. And if you deny the emergency, and scientists are saying we have an emergency. Sorry.
All right. Very good. Jessica, same question. There's a little bit of a tension between that slow and steady approach and the let's do it now. It's an emergency. How are we doing as a town? Where do you stand? And what can a Brattleboro Select Board do about a global issue?
Yeah, I think that global and national problems definitely have local solutions, and local communities can do their part on these topics and carry a piece of the burden. So I really believe that the town of Brattleboro has to do its part as an institution, right? At the last select board meeting, I heard someone say that, hooray, Joe Biden's in the White House, Democrats control Congress, climate change is gonna be taken care of. So we don't need to address those questions in Brattleboro? No, I don't think so. That statement came back to me recently when I was talking with Oscar Heller from the Energy Committee. We had a really wonderful conversation, and he said something. He said he doesn't bring financial questions to the select board, he brings moral ones. It was really interesting to me, especially after hearing Django, another member of the Energy Committee, speak at Tuesday night's meeting. He's a teenager. Can you imagine wanting to be part of town government as a teenager? He just seems so driven, and he speaks with such urgency. Climate change is an emergency. And it's these younger generations that are going to be the first to understand the most dire questions of our time, just like this. So I don't think we can pass the buck on this. I don't think the select board can say national leaders got it covered. I think that we really need to step up, take the expertise and advice from the Energy Committee, take the vision given to us by town meeting representatives, and move forward. Done before 2 minutes.
Ian, you were at that meeting last week. How's the board doing with climate?
Yeah, I was at that meeting. So I think to start it out, I just want to start with this question of global or national issue versus local response. I think that it's a theme, one of the themes that I've seen sort of carry through my first year on the board. And you can really see it in a lot of the things that we've discussed. And in this one in particular, the first time that it really shone brightly to me was a couple of months ago. The board was one of the steps in an approval process for a large solar panel installation here in Brattleboro. It was on, it's going to be on a industrial zoned piece of land that is not, a continuous forest and is on a big hill, so it's really not great land, and it passed unanimously on the board, but there was discussion that night about the realization from people on the board, but also members of the public, of cutting down trees to put up solar panels, and what does this actually look like when we're addressing the issue of climate change on a local level. Like what does the actual implementation of this look like? And that really that sunk in a lot for me. And I think this cow power issue that's being sort of talked around right now is a perfect example of that. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but I support it fully, making Brattleboro 100% renewable in its electricity usage, municipal electricity usage, and 100% carbon neutral, is a make sense policy. And as far as how we're doing moving forward, we passed a resolution this year, non-binding from the Energy Committee that sets a number of goals for us.
All right. All right, Ricky. Are we still there? Ricky, talk to us about climate change. How's the town doing?
I've been here
where
all
you
along.
stand?
I've been listening.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, because I wasn't at that meeting. I've been boycotting going to the meetings. So was there any proposal for any of the trees that are cut down to make space for them, for at least like an equivalent number, if not like a fraction more, like 1.5 trees to be replanted for every tree cut down?
There was not.
Well, that's always an option, just saying, if people want to consider that. The imagination is the limit for how much we can evolve and become greener. And when I look at what some of the practical limits are, is how are we compensating people for their time, skills, and qualifications? People need to be paid for their work, and there needs to be affirmative action, anti-employment discrimination. From my observations through the Vermont Department of Labor, there is really no enforcement keeping businesses from hiring people of color. And so I think that we need a lot more required cultural inclusivity training, so that we make more compatible workspaces, so that we can really evolve what we can do together.
Great. All right, Daniel, climate.
Daniel, climate. So
I can read the full question to you.
No, it's fine. I got it. How are we doing? Well, I mean, every time we have a decision to make about energy use or sustainability matters or efficiency of buildings, we need to make the right decision. And as somebody that has been a climate activist and an organizer with 350 Vermont and 350 nationally, and then somebody that's also sitting on the select board, though, you can have all of the things in the world that you want to achieve, and you don't get to do them all right away, right? So when there's a decision before you, you need to make the right call. And I think that, the discussion we had last week around investing in renewable energy through the Green Mountain Power Cow Power program, that's something that I support doing. It's not the only thing. It does not mean that we can then rest on our laurels. There's long-term work to be done. The town's investment in a sustainability coordinator helps with that, but it is not in and of itself an answer to all the questions. We will build some new buildings in the next few years if a bond vote passes soon. And those buildings have to be built to the most efficient standards, and they have to get us away from fossil fuels. Every time we have that decision, we have to make the right call, and we have to be bold. And I trust us to do that. And in a couple of weeks' time, we'll get back to that issue.
Jackson, how are we doing on climate here in Brattleboro?
Hi. I think that climate change is a massive issue that can't be addressed quickly enough. I think Vermont does better than many places. I know that 60% of Green Mountain Power is hydro, and they're pushing towards more and more renewable energy sources. But the more proposals that we can get coming from the community and ideas from the community that we can rapidly pass, the better. I think my generation has a tendency to feel sort of defeated by climate change, given that we've known about this for years and years and years and watched generations of government do absolutely nothing about it. And even the past 4 years in our current presidency, like either flat out denying the science or being very hesitant and trying to maintain status quo. It's not too late, but it will soon be. The more we can do, the sooner we can do it, the better. Obviously, climate change is a huge issue and one that can't be solved at a local level, but the decisions that we make will be felt by people at a local level. I think we don't need to look further than what's happening in Texas right now, where they privatize their energy grid and now everyone is out of power. The cost of power, I've heard of people getting billed upwards of $60,000 for a day of energy right now. What we decide now and what we put forth now affects everyone, and we can't solve this soon enough. Yeah, slow and steady is too slow.
Very good. All right, Evan, I think you should know the question is about climate. How are we doing in town? And yeah, what's your take on it?
So as Dan said, we need to be bold. And but as Brattleboro, we need to be an example as well. And to be an example, as Dan said, we need to make bold moves. And one of the bold moves that I think we really need to do is facilitate Brattleboro to be more pedestrian and bike friendly. How can we do that? Okay, one of the main platforms that I've been running on is focus of a pedestrian only marketplace in downtown Brattleboro. We need to get rid of the blacktop and we need to add more green space. We need to add more trees. We need a place where people want to congregate instead of sitting in a car idling on Main Street. So it's the little things that although they seem small, are bold when we as a select board can facilitate that type of behavior. We all understand, we all agree that climate change is an emergency and we need to take steps to address it. The cow power, is that a bold enough step? It may be a step in the right direction, but I think a bolder step is to be an example through more solar power that will power our town buildings. We need to be representative. There is nothing more representative of green power than solar panels on town property. So we need to take those steps. We need to figure out how we can represent to our town, to our state, and nationally that we are committed to this crisis, that we are looking to facilitate a more green community. And I really feel that facilitating a pedestrian downtown is really a bold first step towards achieving that objective.
Thanks. Very good. All right, let's discuss the recent community safety review report recommendations. The next board will be tasked with implementing some or all of the recommendations. Would you like to see these adopted in full by the next board? In part? Why? Why not? And if you're not completely familiar with the report, I'll give you just one example. Disarming police for non-responsive tasks such as community speaking or meetings or community events. But you can take this almost any way you want. This is a big issue of the last year. Community safety review. Jessica.
Ooh, I love going first on this one. So I'm actually gonna quote Mr. Chadwick. He said, "We have a crisis on our hands in finding good officers who are willing to commit to the difficult job of serving their town." Talking about police officers, and I really agree. That is a tough job, and the solution is to make their jobs less difficult. right? So the community safety review made some excellent recommendations. And one of them, or the main theme of them, was that the police don't have to take on as much as of a burden as they've been assigned. The select board isn't or shouldn't be perceived as being against the police in any way, but some individuals in the town, they're in need of protection and safety, and they're telling us policing's not the right solution. This community safety report had incredible, devastating stories of harm and hurt, and it was heartbreaking to read that. And we should listen as a community, and certainly as the select board. The millions of dollars that we invest each year in the police department and in policing, clearly they're not being invested well if that trust relationship between members of the community and our police department is on shaky ground. So instead of pouring our money into strategies that don't work, I think the community safety review lays out a series of really great recommendations, slow rollout of them, and really not radical ideas, things that are already being implemented in some communities that can allow our police force to be unburdened, to be a reformed, exciting place to work.
All right. Ian, Community Safety Review Committee, they have issued some recommendations. What should the next board do?
Yeah, so I would say that I support a number of the recommendations just as they are presented. I'm looking forward to seeing how the town comes back with us with work products at the, I believe the next board meeting with some of the recommendations that were fairly broad and maybe needed to be refined some or given a little more direction to the board on what we legally are allowed to do. And there are a couple that I don't agree with. To talk about some that I do agree with, I'll just go down a list of a couple of them. Addressing the gaps in the reporting of race data in the traffic stops, and generally speaking, as I understand it, we're actually supposed to be doing this anyways, and so I absolutely support that. Further, talking about data, I support a much deeper analysis of both traffic stop and intake data for calls. I think that the Community Safety Review Committee began that work, but there is a lot more to be done with it. And if what was so clear was more information gives us just a much greater ability to act on these recommendations. And I want to just touch on what Jessica brought up, which is I'm also really excited to look at what other communities are doing, because there are some things that are in here that I know other communities are thinking about, are struggling with. And so that's part of the discussion that I don't think has developed as much. And so I'm very excited to incorporate that as it moves forward. So I'm very much in support of many of the recommendations, and I'm sorry I don't have enough time to go through the rest of them.
It is a big issue. Ricky, what are your thoughts on the community safety review findings?
I support all of the committees being paid for their time. What they're doing is really important. And even though I or anyone else elected may support it, I really think it's up to the public's discretion to vote on how money is being spent. And I would appreciate if the safety committee would consider adding how to counter conscription to their agenda as well, because I think public safety is really jeopardized by conscription. Like that men are coerced into, men assigned at birth are coerced into enlisting for selective service or the draft by the age of 18, or else lose their public welfare benefits, and which should just be everyone's entitlement to public welfare just for their livelihoods, is just terrifying. And I think that the way to do that is not by asking for state or federal permission, but to publicly vote on seceding so that we can be liberated from the oppression of conscription and how they regulate money. Like they, the song by Killer Mike called Just, he says, look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar. And that's not the type of currency that I value and want to continue exchanging and keeping in circulation. There's a better direction to go into.
Great. All right, Daniel.
Thanks,
I think
Chris.
you're familiar with the Community Safety Review Committee. What do you think of the recommendations?
Right. Anyone that has been watching the select board meetings this year or reading about them in the newspaper would know that I have been a supporter of this process. I'm actually really proud of the work that the board has done, that town staff have done, that the committee has done, and that members of the community undertook in order to make this happen. We've had some extremely challenging meetings and conversations along the way, and I look forward to more of them. I actually think that asking what the next board will do slightly underplays the role of this current board, because on March 2nd, we're gonna be having a conversation about this that may well result in some action. I had a meeting with the town manager just this afternoon about this exact issue. I also want to just kind of let people in the community know, if they haven't read the report, it's a long report, right? I think it's unreasonable to assume that everyone in the community is familiar with all of the report. But when the report is characterized as defunding the police, or when the report is characterized as disarming police, I would say that is a mischaracterization of the report. And the vast majority of the recommendations are actually pretty common sense and are appropriate for our community. And many of them actually have the support already of people within leadership, the police department and the town manager's office. So I look forward to further discussion of it. And I would just like to say that implementation of this does not lie with the select board. And so we will make a clear policy decision and then hopefully move forward and start this long-term work to build alternatives to policing.
Very good. Jackson, how do you feel about the Community Safety Review Committee's work?
Yeah, I want to start by thanking that committee, because like Daniel said, that report is over 200 pages. The amount of work that they put in a relatively short time is incredible, astounding. I fully support the recommendations. I think that all of them are very important for the town. I also like what Daniel said. It's not just defunding the police. It's not just disarming the police. It's building up other support networks so that the police doesn't have to be called every time for everything, that the police aren't the only responders in town. The scope of the police is far too large. They're dealing with a lot of things that they are not trained for, and it leads to a lot of the opposite word for safety, a lot of danger in town. And that is what this report showed. They spoke with the marginalized voices in town. And it's incredible that this work happened and brought with it a clear framework for divesting from the police and investing in the safety of our community. Ian was mentioning looking at what other communities are doing with similar prompts. Ithaca, New York right now is involved in the largest reform effort of the police that potentially the United States has ever seen. The word abolishing has been thrown around. I think that's a great word. I'm very curious to see how things go there, and I think that we cannot approve and move forward with these proposals fast enough. Thank you.
Very good. Evan, how do you weigh in on the community safety review recommendations? Right, you're muted.
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, thanks. So first off, I want to say to any Brattleboro police officers that are listening to this, I believe that you guys are doing overall a fantastic job. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the work that you do every day. I'm proud of the leadership that we have. And if elected to select board, one of my major jobs is to find ways to support you better. Okay. All right. I'm involved in violations of civil rights. I represent individuals in other police departments who have been brutalized by police. And I know what poor policing is. I see it every day in my litigation. I see what a lack of training does. I see what a lack of discipline does. I see what a lack of appreciation does. And we don't have that overall. When's the last time that we have seen a lawsuit being filed against Brattleboro for excessive use of force? We have the leadership at the top, but what we are running into is a potential staffing crisis. We have 20 officers now. Okay, we can sit there and I called Mark Kerrigan. We can sit there and we can have these officers working overtime to fill all the shifts to properly police our Brattleboro. But is that an efficient use of taxpayer money? Or is it more important for us to be able to find the resources necessary to hire good officers who want to commit to this town, like Mark Kerrigan has? Mark Kerrigan grew up here. He's worked in the Brattleboro Police Department as long as I've been here and a lot before that. He worked up the ranks. He knows the pulse of this town. He is the leader that we need. But instead of us saying, okay, these are all the things that you're doing wrong, okay? Yes, the racial disparities in policing, I've seen that report. We didn't have to pay $40,000 for that. We could have called up the UVM professor, Stephanie Seguino, and gotten it from her directly. Okay, that is an issue. How do we deal with it? We deal with it by proper training. Deal with it by ensuring that our officers get the support that they need, that go through the training that they need.
All right, Kurt, how do you feel about the community safety review recommendations?
I feel good about the recommendations. There was only one tiny detail that I didn't like, and I go with it 100%. I think that the public discussion of it has not been appropriate. The greatest emphasis that I see in the report is that the police reform and public safety have to be about the feeling of safety on the part of marginalized people, especially young Black men. This has not been recognized by the select board. Excuse me. This has not been recognized by Mr. Wessel, and he's not 100% with the committee. He said in his editorial piece, well, for him, it's about police safety. I mean, there's no problem with police getting killed in Brattleboro. I think no policeman has been killed in Vermont since 1963 or so during the work in an attack by the public. So we've got to recognize that we want to protect marginalized people, and that's what the report is about. So the disarming of police, which is a proposal from a project of Brattleboro Common Sense that began in 2017. That is the obvious thing to do. It's not a revolutionary idea. They do it in the UK, in towns which are more dangerous than Brattleboro. policemen generally do not carry
All right.
sidearms.
Thank
And
you all for the talk about community safety review. I have to cut you off because one of the major questions that I got lots of input on from the community was retail cannabis on the horizon. Retail cannabis is on the ballot. So how would you like to see this play out in town? What sort of businesses, events, and other opportunities do you think we'll see in Brattleboro in a few years? How would you like to shape this? And I guess on a gut level, voters want to know, like, we could be cool, man, or we could be uptight about this. So let's start off with Ian.
Yeah, start off with saying Article 2 on the ballot. This is the question. I support it 100%. I think that the reason that I supported putting it on the ballot, which was a select board vote a month ago, was because it gives the town time to be a part of the discussion that's going to be happening on the legislative level on the regulation of actually selling cannabis in town. And so that's why it's so important that we make that decision now and we don't wait a couple of years to vote on this. After that, those conversations have happened and we haven't invested the time to be part of the discussion. So yeah, I 100% support it and I support voting on it now. As far as rollout goes, I think having dispensaries in town in the pedestrian downtown is very important. The 1% local option tax that Brattleboro has is going to make retail cannabis very, very important for our income in the future. And, just to speak to the fact that getting this out of the non-regulatory black market of sale and into the regulatory market is beyond just the money, is safer. It's safer for the people buying, it's safer for the community, for neighbors. And I think that it would be foolish for us to not take this opportunity and run with it.
Very good. Ricky, what sort of businesses, events, and other opportunities do you think we'll see in Brattleboro in a few years regarding retail cannabis? What would you like to see us do?
Well, I understand why people would vote yes on that because that is the most, unfortunately, that's the most liberating option for them for their, but I abstained because I don't consent to regulating cannabis, and I don't want to make a deal that to enable people to regulate cannabis. That's all.
That's all?
Yeah.
So what would you like to see in the coming years instead of that then?
Full decriminalization. We don't need regulation.
Okay. Daniel, how would you like to see this play out in the coming years?
Yep. I really hope that people who feel one way or the other on this issue will vote on or before March 2nd. It will be a massive missed opportunity for Brattleboro if this vote fails by a small number of people. And if people are feeling kind of punchy about it and don't want to see it here, then they should get out and vote, right? I think it's really important that as many as possible get out and vote on this question. I'm very much in favor of retail cannabis being allowed in this town. It will be allowed in this state. So why would Brattleboro want to miss out on that massive opportunity? There's an economic opportunity, which is well understood. We have a 1% local options tax. That is the only way that municipalities will be able to benefit from tax revenue directly on this question. So we are well placed for that. I think that, knowing Brattleborians as I do, I think that the vast majority of people see this as a pretty no-brainer kind of issue. I am a person that has been sober for like 7 years or so. I've seen some very iffy false equivalencies between like, cannabis and other drugs or other substances. Cannabis is a pretty harmless substance when used by adults, and that's what these stores are for. None of these stores are going to be selling cannabis to children. To pretend that they will be doing so is irresponsible. We have good zoning here. We've got good people in positions of licensure and regulation. So I have no concerns about it whatsoever, and I will be very happy to see it pass.
All right. Jackson, what do you think about retail marijuana, cannabis? What sort of businesses, events, and opportunities might we see here in the coming years?
I think that retail cannabis is a no-brainer in town. It's a free tax revenue stream. As far as opportunities that it opens up for our town, anyone that lives in downtown Brattleboro and has to pay for parking to go to their home, if we can tax cannabis and lower the parking prices for residents of Brattleboro, it's an interesting equivalency, but I think that it would actually benefit the town greatly, particularly the people that call this town home. I also think throughout this process, it's vitally important to reckon with the harm caused by the criminalization of cannabis prior to this. Vermont has a history of viewing itself as lenient towards the use of cannabis, and that may be true, but only for white folks. And as we move toward a retail model for cannabis, we also need to move toward freeing incarcerated people that are in jail on marijuana charges. I know that the select board lacks the power to do this, but it needs to be on our minds as we move forward. I hate to derail, I do need to mention something. Watching anger arise from that last question felt highly inappropriate. And it's clear to me that not everyone in this meeting read the community safety report. If your response to that report is more implicit bias training, then there was no reading comprehension. I don't want to call out the police department, but it was the actions of the interim chief that resulted in 8 community members losing their jobs at the height of this pandemic. This isn't an issue of good cops or bad cops and proper or improper staffing. This is an issue of systemic change around how we view safety and policing moving forward. We stand at the precipice of a revolutionary opportunity to make our town safer, and the answer is not making a couple of good hires. Thank you.
All right. Let's see, who's next? Evan, retail cannabis. How will Brattleboro look in a few years?
Yeah, agree generally. It's a no-brainer to vote yes in my view. The question is where? And what are we going to do with the tax revenue that is generated from this? Yes, cannabis is a relatively harmless drug for adults. My major concern is the harm that it has on developing brains, and whether or not we will be facilitating, although not lawfully, whether there will be a impression from our youth that since we are openly selling it and it is legal, that it is okay for them to consume it. It is a big concern. And so how do we combat that? I think that some of the portion of the revenue that we derive should go towards youth programs to keep kids busy after school, to go to the Boys and Girls Club, to go to athletic programs, to go to arts programs. I think that it's very important that we invest in keeping our kids busy. And so when I first started thinking about where would be good retail, should we limit it to outside of town to keep, consumption and for it to be, and then I had a conversation with Dick DeGray about a local business owner, and he convinced me otherwise. He feels that it should be downtown, that the retail should be downtown. The reason being is that people will come to buy cannabis when they come to town, and they'll stick around. Maybe they'll stop at his shop, maybe they'll stop at Burroughs Specialized Sports, maybe they'll stop somewhere else. So my opinion has changed there, and is a greater message to voters. My mind will continue to be changed with good arguments that are going to be good for our town. And I think that retail cannabis is one of those that we can really capitalize, but we need to take that money and we need to spend it effectively to assist both our youth and other people struggling. So that's my position.
All right. Kurt, retail cannabis. How would you like to shape this going forward?
I wish there were a moment between speakers to digest what people say.
That'll be on replay when you play it back tomorrow.
Okay.
This is a great conversation. I agree with you. Go ahead.
The thing is with these no-brainers, I very often feel that we're accepting something too quickly. I favor it, but I don't like it being a no-brainer because we're missing something. And we're missing something that Mr. Stein brought up and that Ricky brought up. It shouldn't be regulated. If it's harmless, supposedly it's the legislature did its due diligence on this issue by decriminalizing it, but they didn't fully legalize it. And for people to not have the right to do whatever they want with the marijuana that they want to grow in whatever amounts, it's gross. And it happened only so that big business could get its finger on this thing. That's why it took so long. You're going to have these dispensaries and all. That's big business stepping in here, and it shouldn't be happening any more than it should be happening that people who grow tomatoes in their gardens should be regulated. I mean, somebody growing a tomato in his garden or her garden ought to be able to do that without interference by the government. That's what we missed when the whole society has been saying it's a no-brainer. And people should be pardoned right on that.
All right. Retail tomatoes. Jessica.
I am totally in favor of retail tomatoes. I mean,
The retail cannabis issue.
Both. I think both are great. I agree with Kurt that it definitely shouldn't be one of those, I'll say I'm in agreement with it, but I actually do have concerns. So some of the concerns that Evan actually brought up, I agree with. How is this going to impact and influence the younger folks in our community, the teenagers, who may feel like this is normalizing cannabis use, which can be of less harm for adults, but certainly to a developing brain, it can have impacts as far as how those brains develop and how they develop a relationship to the chemical in cannabis. So I think that we definitely need to do due diligence in rolling it out. I've been working on the planning board. We've already started conversations at the planning board level on what rolling retail cannabis out in our community could mean. And I think having this vote now is fantastic so that we can prepare and be ready, like Ian said, for when it is finally allowed through the state to grant licenses to these retail businesses and have this happen in the fall of 2022. So I think it's really, no matter how we feel, it's not really the role of the select board to say yay or nay to retail cannabis. It is certainly our role to engage the community, make requests of committees, and take the recommendations and the expertise that come from those community conversations and those committees and create policy with them.
All right. I think everybody needs a little moment of stretch, first of all. Kurt, how's your dog doing? Can you make it another hour?
I've been stretching the whole time, so I am ready to jump in with talking about how this Article 2 was proposed is part of the reason why I've been boycotting going to the select board meetings. Like, we are going through so many intersectional existential crises, and for them to prioritize time on just trying to exploit people more through regulating a plant in stigmatizing and perpetuating stigma of it still is just, well, there's so many other things we could be focusing on.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move on to our next question, which I'm sure all of you are going to really like. This one is about equity and access. Recently, the town has had increasing discussions of equity and access and privilege. Can the select board be all things to all people in town? If not, who is town government for? And who will you be representing? Tell us about how you view the system of town governance here, the role of citizens. And then one sort of bonus question that was thrown in here is, do you have connections with communities that have not been historically represented in Brattleboro politics? How do you make space for differing points of view? And we begin with Ricky.
So thank you for unmuting me. So I have noticed that there is no process for doing a recall petition to impeach the municipal manager. And so this is a very specific example of institutional pattern of nepotism where people are hired for huge responsibilities that they're not held accountable to the public. And so I have been trying to motion as much as I can for us to do that, but we're not really given the resources to invest the time into doing that. Can you ask the question again if there were more context for me?
It's about equity and access and privilege. Like, who's town government for? Is it for everybody, you know, or is it for the people that yell the loudest in the room? Is it for the people that don't show up at all?
Well, I've been trying to get people to co-organize to allow the public to meet for the representative meetings and to increase the number of representative meetings. Like, we shouldn't just be meeting once a year at a 13-hour session. That's crazy. And so if we got bus shuttles and a space for the public to go to with a phone access so they could call us too, because now we're doing it on Zoom meetings, then those are all steps to get the public more involved.
All right, thanks. Daniel. Who does town government work for? And
well, there's an
how do you
easy
make
answer for that
space for
question.
differing points of view?
Yeah, I mean, obviously town government works for the people of the town. But it is very much true of our representative democracy and others, that the people who show up are the ones that make the decision, right? The people that shout the loudest are often the ones that are heard. The people with the most power tend to have the most access, and that power, lines up pretty, it is a no-brainer, and maybe we should get away from using the phrase no-brainer tonight because I want to actually engage my brain. But, the members of the business community, members of historically privileged groups have easy access to politicians at this level and other levels. There's much to be done around increasing access. We had a conversation a couple of months back where we were talking about funding for a new town website, which is sorely needed. And as part of that conversation, Ian was proposing a position that would, Ian will probably explain it better, but I'll just explain it as I remember it. And the chats are very distracting, so please don't. We were talking about a public engagement officer. I've had a conversation with a friend in the past who comes from a community organizing background. I have experience in that work as well, and thinks about it in terms of like an organizer for the town. We have to really engage with people in many, many ways in order to make them aware of like what's going on in the town, what the opportunities are. But that is ongoing work. There is no simple, easy answer to it.
All right. There's no
I'll
easy
stop
answer.
there.
And you've been saved by the stop. Jackson.
Thanks, Liz.
Who's town government for, and how do you make space for differing points of view?
Sure. I do want to start on accessibility. Dan just mentioned the chat, and Ricky posted in the chat what I was thinking, that this forum really should have an ASL interpreter. I think that would expand accessibility. I think that moving to Zoom has increased accessibility and engagement. It makes it, yeah, the chat is really distracting.
Turn it off.
It does make the town meetings easier to attend. More people can come. There's always the issue of folks in town without access to internet. Because ideally, town government serves everyone in town, not just landlords, not just wealthy white men. Ideally, we hear all of the voices in town. And that's something that I do think that the voices in town have been making themselves heard this year. I'm personally close with a lot of the queer folks in town. I know that we are trying our best to be heard and trying to uplift other voices. I recognize my privilege as a masculine passing white person. So it is all of our jobs to make sure that town government serves everyone, not just the people that have the easiest time speaking, not just the people that don't face discrimination when they speak, but everyone. Yeah, and ASL interpreters do help with that, because that expands our reach even further. Thank you.
All right, Evan, how do you see the system of town governance, and who's it for?
It's for everyone. I agree with everyone on that. But look at how we hold our select board meetings pre-COVID. It's in this big brick building on top of a hill. It's hard to even get to these meetings. I believe Ricky even said she was trying to find them one time. They didn't even have any signs to direct where to go. So how do we address that, at least in a limited basis? Obviously, we can't do it all the time with the varying weather. We have a community center downtown. Again, that fills into the pedestrian-only marketplace that I would really like to champion if elected to the select board. Look at Harmony parking lots, prime example. Does that make sense to have a stage out there where we hold some of our select board meetings in the town itself, outdoors, where people can access them in a way that makes sense for them, that makes them feel comfortable? They're not next to the DCF office. They're not next to what used to be the Brattleboro Police Department. They're outside, they're in a free area, it's open, they feel like they can come and go without everyone looking at them. So these are the type of solutions that we can impose as a select board if we have that downtown marketplace that will act not only to boost commerce, not only to boost civic engagement as far as just collaboration, but also with our government processes. These are the type of things that we need to be thinking about as a select board in order to make our community more inclusive. We can't just keep going back to the same old brick and mortar form of government. It needs to be more open, and the best way to do that is to have it in an open space as much as we possibly can.
Down by the retail cannabis and retail tomatoes, so we can throw them at people. Kurt, talk to us about equity, access, privilege, representation.
That's a great idea, Evan. I'm seeing how you put those things together. It's not just commerce, it's the downtown plaza, it's Hyde Park, it's everything. Great. As I was mentioning earlier on the introduction, I think we have a problem with that. Daniel mentioned the website. And the website, try to find where RTM is. It's 3 levels down. It's misclassified as a committee. And that is the most representative assembly around. Each person represents just 100 people on the RTM, and it's hidden and it's dominated by the select board. the kinds of things we're doing, we need to make the select board compensation better so that it is accessible to people who cannot afford to volunteer. It's nice to say, oh, but it should be a volunteer position. Well, if you don't want the compensation, you can give it back. So the select board should be compensated in the tune of a decent part-time job. I personally, as a member of BCS, Brattleboro Common Sense, have been proposing that almost every year, and glad to see that it gets a serious debate. It got a serious debate last year. And, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, it was just a laughable idea. So that's making progress. But what? We also need to bring more people we need to enfranchise more people. So BCS started a campaign to lower the voting age, to get people interested in their communities at a younger age. And that was approved in 2019 by the town. The seating of the select board, the seating of RTM.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. I know we have a tight schedule. Jessica, how do you feel about equity, access, and privilege? How do you make spaces for differing points of view and historically non-represented voices?
Yeah, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, what really inspired me was how the community has gotten engaged this year. And a lot of those folks that have been showing up and engaging with the meetings are friends of mine, are in my community, and I'm super excited that a handful of them are volunteering for my campaign this year. I was very inspired to host my first volunteer meeting where I had 2 people of color from the community and 2 people from the LGBTQ community, and then an educator and a nonprofit worker, all sitting around the table at my first volunteer meeting. So I feel like while I am a white woman, I have the friendships, the trust relationships, and the community around me that can help inform me and make decisions that are more informed. So going back to Evan's idea, I love his idea of having a public space where we could hold select board meetings. I also love Zoom meetings. I think that has made participation so much more accessible for folks. And so I think that has a great impact on folks' access. Also, there is something I want to acknowledge, and I was going to say this in the first part, but select board members who get elected on town meeting days that are not also big primary election days often get elected with between 400 and 1,200 votes. That's not a big percentage of our town population. And to think that we could ever be endowed with the power to make decisions without reaching out to the community and without having those deep conversations, I think is a great fallacy.
All right. Ian, you've been on the board for a year. When the decision is placed in front of you, how do you know who you're representing?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for this question. It is something that I have thought about a lot. Being on the board for my first year, my first time really representing any kind of large group of people, it made me think a lot about what democracy in town looks like. You know, it has direct democracy through town votes. It has representative democracy in our representative town meeting, and it has indirect democracy in the select board. Because as much as I'd love to, I can't ask every single person in town about every vote. At some point, it just comes down to my views, my beliefs, my perspective, and what I'm listening to and hearing. And so the question of equity comes up in my mind all the time with so many of the issues that we are discussing. And accessibility is hand in hand with it. And so what I see as a way that we as a select board can really address this issue in some actionable way is in making the municipal government more accessible to people. So that looks like the $75,000 that the town government has invested in the redoing the website is an initial investment in what I believe should be a larger discussion on how we can make material that the town produces and the work that the town does easier for people to get into, because the barrier that keeps people from getting in can be as simple as not knowing how our government functions, let alone when a town representative town meeting is, or when a select board meeting is, how to access the meeting. That also brings me to my second point, which is COVID has created more accessibility by putting the meetings online. And I believe that thankfully, hopefully, COVID will be over at some point. When we move back to not fully online, we need to have a hybrid model where we still have an electronic component so that people can access the meeting in that capacity.
All right. Very good. Well, we're down to our final question, then we'll have some closing remarks. We're moving along. I want to thank you all for hanging in there. And thank you, Timekeeper, for keeping us on track. Question 5 is about one of my favorite things, and it's the boring thing, infrastructure. There's some big projects in the near future, as well as our ongoing needs. And some of you have already talked about it a little bit. There's the water treatment plant coming up, the new Amtrak station, new Department of Public Works buildings planned. On top of that, we have bike paths, we have roads that are paved, we have sidewalks and paths, and one of my pet issues, shade trees. So are we spending our infrastructure dollars wisely? And are there any town projects that you're especially interested in? Daniel.
The boring question is actually not the boring question. This is the meat of the work question. So the water treatment plant project is underway, I guess, in a sense. You know, we have design, we have a bond vote scheduled. If that vote passes, which I hope it will, we will build that new building, and it's important infrastructure for the town. I think like one of the things that a municipal government can do is ensure clean drinking water for its residents, right? Clean and safe drinking water for its residents is kind of important. Oh, my speaker just changed. If that is, oh, and now it changed back. Weird.
You sound fine.
Okay, Liz, I need 10 extra seconds, please. One of the boring but important things that, you know, I helped make happen in the last couple of months was asking Dan Tyler, the highways supervisor, to really give us a figure on how much money is needed to maintain Brattleboro's roads on the schedule of which they need to be replaced. Currently, we underfund our road paving projects and have done for a number of years. So we're behind, and to get caught up, we need to spend I think it was about 250,000 more than we're currently spending annually, maybe 150. And we elected a sort of compromise path where we were going to increase the funding this year by 50,000. And if Ian and I are re-elected, and perhaps if Liz is feeling nice, we will get an extra 50,000 on top of that next year, so that we can get towards the right kind of investment in that critical infrastructure. The roads are like this bottomless pit that, you know, you can keep throwing money at the roads and they will always need replacing. And that is just true. You know, if you drive down Putney Road or Western Avenue today, it is rough.
All right.
And I want to stop that.
All right. Jackson, talk to us about infrastructure and roads and sidewalks and paths and trees and
parking.
And parking.
Because I live on Main Street and I have been moving for the past 3 days. And I have been parking blocks from my house and carrying dressers blocks from my house to move off of Main Street. So I think that is a huge issue in this town, is accessibility to our own homes. There are plenty of people that live on Main Street and on Elliott Street and on Flat Street and all of these like downtown roads that have 4 parking spaces. I think that the select board did a really good job in rolling out COVID safety this year. And the parklets were a good way of keeping dining outdoors and making it so less people can park downtown. If Harmony Lot was converted into a market, less parking downtown, less accessibility to our homes. I think that the folks that live downtown are aware of this. And I will quickly mention that I grew up in a town with far worse road repair and infrastructure maintenance than this one. And I would hate to see Brattleboro go down that road, because getting a flat tire driving to school is not fun because there's massive potholes in the road. So yeah, Daniel, throw that money at the roads. Like these are things that need to be maintained consistently. But I really think that expanding access to parking downtown, and especially if we can tax cannabis to reduce prices of municipal lots, I think there's a lot of steps we can take to increase access through infrastructure. And water treatment is great. Clean water, yeah.
Great. Evan, infrastructure. Do you agree that we're spending our infrastructure dollars correctly? Paving and such?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dan that it is a bottomless pit to maintain the roads in a way that is safe and efficient for people. I do think that what we need to do is figure out whether there are some efficiencies in what we spend. So for instance, how can we, to address Dan's issue, how can we cut down on traffic, which would then cut down on road maintenance? Well, one of the ways to do that is to make it more user-friendly for bicycles and pedestrians. Again, falling back on my pedestrian-only marketplace. How do we get people to want to stay downtown as opposed to driving back and forth? Again, a pedestrian-only marketplace downtown makes sense. We can invest money in infrastructure and also address issues involving climate change, involving parking, involving a lot of other things. But we cannot just throw money at a problem and saying we have to spend this money just to solve this problem. What we want to do is think innovatively to spend money to reduce the expenses that we're spending on basic infrastructure needs. But clean water, I know one of the issues that may be coming up soon is whether or not there should be some type of water treatment. Chlorination is what I'm hearing. That is another big issue that needs to be discussed. I wish I had an answer to that tonight, but I don't, because I have not done the research on those issues. But yes, the basic infrastructure, it needs to be spent, and it's a difficult job for the select board to be able to really balance the cost and the benefit. But I just feel that we can be more creative with our infrastructure dollars to address other pressing issues in town, as well as the immediate issue of the infrastructure itself.
Right. Kurt, what do you think about our roads and sidewalks and trees and buildings? Are we spending our money correctly?
No, we haven't. We haven't been spending our money correctly. We spend our money sort of in a no-brainer style. I'm thinking of the water treatment vote in 2011, in which the debate went actually like this. The old water treatment plant as it was had been getting over $150,000 of maintenance work in a year. That was going on and going on. It was a steady thing. Every year, 150 to 180,000. And the solution was to get a bond for a $31 million replacement that had a life expectancy of 20 years. So you divide 20 years, you divide $30 million by 20, and you get 1.5 million. Well, that's a lot more than we had been spending on maintaining the old one. But there was such a good feeling about this new thing that the select board managed to ram it through. And now it's 9 years later and the thing needs another zillion dollars. So I think we needed to just go a little bit slow with that. Now, besides the water treatment plant, which was a gross error, and we're going to repeat it now, I think. We have to go slow. And I agree with Evan that we should make the climate principles, the guide for our infrastructure all the way through, and maybe have a municipal ride sharing system to assist in that kind of thing.
Very good. Jessica, how do you feel about infrastructure and how we're spending our infrastructure dollars?
Well, I think that, you know, I agree with a lot of the things Daniel was saying about how things have gone, the importance of, you know, having clean water and maintaining our roads and continuing to evaluate whether buildings need to get updated. It's all, you know, the fun, boring stuff of the select board that we get to push down the line. And I think it's tough on some boards where there have been either more enthusiastic or conservative preceding boards, and then you have to deal with the consequences of we have to ask the town to spend more, or we have to cut back on things. So so I think that Brattleboro has been doing the best that it can, and I think that we can't ask for much more than that. I think that Evan's idea about the public space is really interesting, and it goes right along the lines of the downtown planning that process that we just engaged with in the planning commission that we did the year before COVID struck, and it definitely identified some spaces that would be excellent to host pedestrian markets, a bike and pedestrian pathway through the downtown, and more that would encourage alternative modes of transportation to take folks off of our roads and potentially out of those centralized parking spots, Jackson, that are so important to downtown residents, and put them in the parking lots that are on the more edges of town, which hardly get used. Harris Place, for example, is often quite empty. So, yeah, I think that there is some fun work to be done and some boring work to be done, and it's all gotta get done. And we gotta maintain our roads, and we gotta continue to keep track of all those buildings. All right, I'll stop.
Right. Ian, how are we doing with infrastructure, and do you have any pet projects you're especially interested in?
Yes, I am so happy about this question. When it became COVID safe, or as safe as it could be in COVID, I immediately emailed Steve Barrett and took tours of the water treatment plant and the wastewater plant because I actually just really like this stuff outside of my select board duties. And it's really important. So I think it breaks down into two categories. One are the things that we need to be a town, like clean water, roads that aren't full of potholes, a wastewater treatment plant, so that when you turn the faucet, the water's clean, and when you flush the toilet flushes. And those things, we save money when we plan. And one of the things that I have learned this year is that our town municipal staff and government is doing that. And we have a plan for many infrastructure projects moving forward. And it's those plans where we do not have a sudden emergency infrastructure project that we suddenly don't have the money for because we've been spending on other things. So it's that kind of plan that saves us money in the long term. And that's the water treatment plant is, in my belief, one of those implementations of plans. The other category, very quickly, is infrastructure projects that we can take advantage of to make Brattleboro more sellable to people to come here. So you've got the Hinsdale project, the Putney Road project, and the Amtrak station all coming in. These are going to be huge things that are going to change how Brattleboro looks. And the idea that we could, for example, continue the bike path from the West River Trail and pull it all the way to the Amtrak station to take advantage of the fact that we now have a raised platform there. These are the sort of things that we could use to advertise Brattleboro.
All right. Ricky, how do you feel about infrastructure and trees and roads and sidewalks?
So I have felt sad, angry, and disappointed that although people on the select board say that they value water as that they haven't allocated any funds so that low-income people can afford certified lab water tests. Because from my understanding, no matter how wonderful and perfect the water at the treatment center is, if it's still going through 100-year-old pipes to places, there can be a lot of cracks along the way and contamination. And so I have many aspirations for many infrastructure designs, but I think we need to focus on some of the basic human needs like public restrooms. There are no public bathrooms. I would love for us to eventually, when we solve that, to eventually invest into a municipal space center, but there are practical bathroom issues to focus on first. And I also am hoping to get the cucumber magnolia tree over by the Abbiati Monument to be given more historical preservation rights. And I would like to have more landscaping in the area, but I'm going to stop.
I'm glad you mentioned the old tree. All right, well, we're right on schedule, and that brings us to our 1-minute closing remarks. You made it, you survived. Is there anything that you would like to talk about that I didn't ask you about? Any final messages to the voters out there? Jackson.
Yeah, it goes back to town government is designed to support the town and to represent the town. So I want to hear from all of you. I feel as though I've said a lot. For the younger generation, you can find me on Instagram at dirt_scramp, SKRAMP. Or you can email me at jalexanderste@gmail.com. Tell me what you view for the town. Tell me what you want to see done. I want to hear from you all. I want to have discussions with you all. Thank you.
Great. Evan. Oh, a mute. Hold on, a mute there. There you go.
I'm really proud of this debate. It really brings back the importance of local government, and that we have such a diverse and an intelligent view of our town and how it should move forward. And so I give everyone here tonight a big thank you for this very civic debate, a professional, intelligent debate. We all have different things that we bring to the table. And in no way in a minute can I explain how I am different from everyone else here, because the reason that we're all here is that we love our town and we want to serve our town and we want to do what we feel is best for our town. I'm no different. I may have a couple of different views than some of our other candidates, but I love this town just as much as anyone else. It's my home. It will always be my home. I will die here. Because I have committed to this since 2006. And after about 3 years of living here, I realized how special of a place this is. And so thank you.
Thank you. Kurt.
I think we got 2 emergencies to deal with, democracy and climate, and that everything we do we should have those things in mind all the time. People used to have the Pledge of Allegiance every day and the flag at the front of the room. It should be climate and restoring democracy. We need tolerance in Brattleboro. Last year there was a perfect example of bad tolerance. The Trump supporters were demonstrating and they were harassed by our tolerant people of Brattleboro. That was a shame, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want that kind of thing to happen. I want us all to talk together, including Trump supporters. They have a place here in Brattleboro.
All right, Jessica.
Hi. Yeah. So one of the things that I opened with was that Brattleboro is home currently to a really diverse population. Folks that have not invested generations like my family has, but have just arrived. And we have a great opportunity for engaging them in creating the new vision for what Brattleboro is like for the future. I've been doing that on the Planning Commission, and I love that some of the ideas that we've been talking about for years, months, have risen to the conversation tonight, from the pedestrian marketplace to the solar siting, which we've got a subcommittee working on right now, to even how to make committee work more accessible to folks. So I'm excited about taking all of that work that I've done with the Planning Commission and now turning it to the Select Board to say, all right, what can I bring to the table? I've got these 4 years behind me. I'm ready for something more active and more actionable.
How dare you go over. Ian.
I want to thank all the candidates as well, and really echo Evan's point. You know, I think that this is a really important part of the election process, and I want to encourage everyone to vote. And specifically also to vote on Article 3, which is a question on town sovereignty. And there's a great editorial from the town manager in the Reformer, so you can learn more about it. You know, I want to just end with a real sense of optimism that I have. The COVID-19 pandemic has been so difficult, and I have been just amazed at how this community has come together. And while there are certainly many challenges that we have to face, I'm left with a lot of optimism moving forward that we can all work together to overcome them.
Very good. Ricky, got a final statement? Things people should know that I haven't asked you about?
Well, a little bit more on infrastructure is that I was thinking about how I had proposed for there to be alternatives to divest from using salt because of the amount of erosion and acidity that causes. And grapes and compost, grape compost is an option that I think that we need to hire more people to have a sustainability team and not just one coordinator responsible for such a huge task. And also that I have been investigating the Sokoke tribe, the alleged Sokoke tribe, that the different news medias have been misrepresenting the authentic native tribe or the Odanak people that have been discriminated against so much in Vermont that the courts dismissed recognizing them, and so they've been pushed up to Quebec, Canada. And
all right, thank you very much. And Daniel, final words?
Yeah, thanks to you, and thanks to BCTV and Nolan and Brian and Core for being behind the scenes and making this happen. I hope that when the voters cast their ballot this time, they'll remember the work that I did on the Select Board, you know, during the COVID pandemic. There is no comparable period for other Select Board members in memory. I'm proud of the work that we've done. I think that when we've been faced with really challenging decisions and challenging moments, we've stepped up. And if elected for another year, I will continue to serve in that same manner by doing my homework, by caring about the people, and by listening.
Very good. All right, well, thank you all for participating. I think we've done an excellent job here of making the voter's choice both well-informed and very difficult. I think you've elucidated many finer distinctions amongst yourselves, and I think voters are better off for it. Special thanks to our timekeeper, Elizabeth McLaughlin, and of course to BCTV and iBrattleboro.com. And for all of you for watching, a reminder that town meeting day elections are on March 2nd at the American Legion from 7 to 7, and absentee voting is already underway. And if you have any questions, the phone number for the Brattleboro Town Clerk is 251-8157. I did it for you, Ian. All right. I think that concludes the Select Board Candidate Forum. Thanks for watching, everybody, and thanks for participating.